Chapter 41. Chapter 36. Well, you're officially out of the running, Theo. How does it feel to be a loser? Daphne's voice reached Eliza's ears as she approached the compartment her court was sitting in. I don't know, Daph. How does it feel? Eliza snorted as she dragged her trunk behind her. Besides, I would have won if someone hadn't interrupted them at the ball. Don't be such a sore loser, Draco drawled, and that was when Eliza finally flung open the door to the compartment with a smug grin. Actually, you've all lost, she announced brightly. You know about this? Blaze yelped as Eliza easily levitated her trunk into the overhead compartment. Of course, he echoed, looking quite faint. Wait, Daphne interrupted, pointing at Eliza with an accusatory finger. What do you mean we've all lost? Eliza said nothing and simply continued to smile her stupid, smug smile. Get out, Daphne said as realization dawned her. No way, said Draco, and Eliza threw herself onto the seat next to Blaze, kicking her legs over his. When? Blaze demanded, shuffling so he could get comfy beneath her. New Year's Eve, Eliza replied with a smirk as her court all let out some mumbled curses. Blaze was just in the middle of his fucking course tirade when Daphne leaned forward with a mischievous smile. Okay, but you have to answer this. How was it? No, Theo said vehemently. We are not going there. I don't want to know. Oh, come on, Theo, Blaze whined. Don't be such a prude. I'm with Theo on this one, Draco chimed in with a grimace. The Dark Lord isn't knocking on your manor door. You stay out of it. Eliza leaned back with a smile as her court burst into their usual arguments about her. She bought them all chocolate frogs as a consolation prize. By the time they were back at Hogwarts, a sense of trepidation had settled over them. They had been sure they would have been returning to an Umbridge-free castle after Yule, and Eliza's disappointment was echoed in all of them. Even the rest of Hogwarts seemed somber as they all entered the great hall for the start of term feast. Umbridge sat looking ridiculously smug at the teacher's table, and Eliza glared at her mulishly from her spot at the Slytherin table. You know, if you're planning to kill her, you should stop shooting daggers at her. It makes you look pretty suspicious. Both the Weasley twins chimed in unison, and Eliza stared at them in confusion as they leaned over Blaze at the table. What are you two doing over here? She found herself asking, lips twitching into a small smile when Blaze slumped against the table to avoid knocking his head against Fred's. We heard from a little birdie that your Hogwarts coup was halted. We were wondering if you wanted to go through with some more of our plans. The grins they were sending her were positively evil. She glanced up again at Umbridge, who was adjusting the large, pompous bow in her hair. Friday, the abandoned classroom. Meet you there at the usual time. You're on, they both said, and then turned on their heels back to the Gryffindor table. I'll never understand how you became friends with them, said Daphne with furrowed brows. Blame Blaze, Eliza responded. She would get Umbridge out of Hogwarts, no matter what it took. Eliza was honestly expecting the first week back to be rather easy, but she should have known that what with being an absolute royal dick, Umbridge would never take a day off. Eliza was just coming back from the chamber after visiting Jormy when she bumped into her court in the entrance hall. They were all staring up at the wall with looks of despondency, and Eliza pushed herself between Blaze and Draco. What number are we on now? 26 and counting, Theo responded dryly, and Eliza quickly scanned the newest decree. Teachers are hereby banned from giving students any information that is not strictly related to the subjects they are not paid to teach. She must be rather pissed about my chats with Severus, Eliza commented after reading it. I heard McGonagall's in the firing line as well, Blaze said, throwing his arm over Eliza's shoulder as they started heading towards lunch. She's been helping out the students, and everyone knows how close she is to Dumbledore and the Order. Ah, so it's a school-wide vendetta, and not just an Eliza Potter one, Eliza remarked, and Draco scoffed. She wouldn't have an Eliza Potter vendetta if you just stopped mouthing off about the ministry. But Draco, she pouted, that's my favorite pastime. They all settled down at the table, and Eliza pulled out her journal that was connected to Tom's. Plonking her ink pot onto the table, she started to scrawl another message into the notebook. Another decree today. Staff can't give students information unless it directly correlates to the subject they are paid to teach. I'm sure that breaks a law somewhere, right? Tom hadn't spoken to her since New Year's Eve, which was honestly to be expected. Tom had the emotional capacity of a particularly disgruntled flobberworm, and even though she was freaking out over their kiss, she was sure Tom would be freaking out about it more. Because whatever she and Tom were, or even could be, she doubted it would be anything with no strings attached. She didn't know what to think of it all, really. She harbored a crush that she knew, but she had no idea what Tom thought. Was all of this just because she was his Horcrux? She knew he respected her, but was this all simply another obsession? What would he do when he tired of her, which at this point seemed to be an inevitable outcome? But Eliza also couldn't deny that that kiss would be enough to fuel her patroness for a lifetime. So she had decided that she would simply leave it to him to make the next move. He was a dark lord, which meant when it came to feelings, he was more obtuse than she was. She would let him come to terms with it himself. That wasn't to say she wouldn't pester him in the meantime, however. "I'll catch up with the rest of you later," Eliza said as they rose from the table. "I have a few errands to run. Are any of those errands legal?" Blaze asked, and Daphne snickered quietly when Eliza had to stop and think. "Currently, no. In the future, maybe. After all, taking the mandrake leaves wasn't exactly criminal. It was what she intended to do with them after where things became a bit dubious. Didn't everyone say family traditions were important? January slipped by surprisingly quickly, especially once Eliza picked up her underground classroom once again. Umbridge was just as impassable as ever and had actually placed Hagrid on a probation, which Eliza was slightly sad about it. Hagrid always brought in the most interesting creatures. And so, the day before Valentine's, she was both bewildered and yet not at all surprised to find a message in her notebook from Tom. "Hello, little star. I believe we need to discuss some plans. Are you free tomorrow?" Daphne peered over her shoulder, scanning the small and brief message, and let out a small huff of disappointment. "Has he still not mentioned the kiss yet?" she asked, and Eliza shook her head. "I rather doubt he will at all. The last time Tom and I had a heart-to-heart, we ended up dueling in the Charms corridor. I am begging you to stop talking about the Dark Lord's love life," Draco said from his spot on the sofa next to Eliza. "Well, who else's are we going to talk about? Yours. You can't talk about what doesn't exist, Draco." Now, children," Blaze cut in smoothly, making Eliza laugh. "Think about the example you're setting." He continued to chide them. Eliza was sure he would have continued if Theo hadn't picked up a cushion and thrown it straight at his face. "Really?" Blaze deadpanned. "Was that really necessary?" Theo shrugged. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Eliza stopped them before they had a full-fledged pillow fight in the middle of the common room. "So what diabolic schemes did you want to talk about?" Eliza wrote into the notebook on Friday night. She had already retreated into her dorms, and after bullying Draco into getting a hot chocolate for her, was now curled up under her blankets, sipping on it contentedly. She had to put extra sugar in it to combat the bitterness of the mandrake leaf, but sometimes sacrifices had to be made. She only had to wait for a few more minutes before the journal heated up, a sure sign that Tom was writing back to her. "I thought it would be best to discuss our plans in regards to my reveal and what you're planning for Umbridge. It wouldn't do for you to catch me unawares, darling. Are we going through with my plan, then? I reveal myself to Dumbledore as Voldemort, but still continue to appear as Lord Gaunt on the Wisengamot. We split his attention, make him focus on militarizing rather than occupying more positions in the Wisengamot. You turn to him and learn all of his plans, so we stay one step ahead. By the end of your 6th year, he will be dead, and he will die a deranged old man who has been discredited to the fullest. It seems like you've got it all worked out," Eliza wrote back with no small amount of smugness over hearing Tom choose her plan. "Yes, but where should this reveal happen? We can't risk anyone else finding out, otherwise it would negate the whole point." Eliza sighed slightly. Tom was never fun when he was being so serious. The Department of Mysteries. "Pretend you need me to go in and pick up the prophecy, and then we meet there, you with your Death Eaters and me with the Order. We can duel, you can reveal yourself, and then apparate before anyone else turns up. The Department of Mysteries. That could definitely work, but how would I lure you there? Everyone knows your occlumency barriers are rather formidable, darling," Tom commented, and Eliza preened slightly at the praise. "I could drop them." Eliza wrote hesitantly, and Tom replied ridiculously quickly. "You can do that." Eliza lowered her occlumency barriers in response and was immediately assaulted by foreign emotions. Curiosity and satisfaction became a quiet, niggling awareness in the back of her mind, and she felt a flash of surprise, as Tom obviously sensed their connection on his side as well. Suddenly being able to invade your mind would be too suspicious, I think. What other ways could I lure you into the department? Tom wrote back, evidently feeling no need to close off their connection on his side. Eliza left her occlumency shields down and allowed his emotions to flood through her as well. It brought a whole different layer to their conversation, and Eliza wondered why they had never done it before. Everyone knows I'm rather protective of my court. You could kidnap one and send me a ransom letter. I'd go and alert the order when I was already in the department. We start dueling before Albus Dumbledore strides in. My Death Eaters deal with as many Order members as we can. And then, when Dumbledore goes to duel me to protect his student, I reveal myself. And then escape directly after. But what about the prophecy? Dumbledore will be expecting to see one she could feel Tom considering her words through their link, and she took another sip of her hot chocolate, sighing contentedly as she shifted further beneath her blankets. You could just say it's smashed. He'll probably try and tell you it anyway. Meddling old coot that he is. Tom's vendetta against Dumbledore would never not be entertaining. That just leaves the when and the who. Theo and Draco have sworn off being hostages forever thanks to the second task. You can't particularly blame them, darling. If I woke up on the back of a Kelpie, I'd never be your hostage again either. Well, he made a fair enough point. And if it were one of my court, you would have to find a day to kidnap one of them without Hogwarts noticing. Also, I refuse to do all of this in owl season. My exams trump your needs to be a dastardly Dark Lord. Fair enough, Tom wrote back, and Eliza could feel an echo of amusement through their link. What if I took your godfather? She and Tom spent the rest of the night planning and scheming about their reveal and Eliza's plans for Umbridge. And Eliza was happy to know that the slight giddiness she felt upon talking to Tom wasn't solely her own. Tom sighed as he placed his journal to the side after finishing up his talks with Eliza. Running a hand through his hair, he heaved another sigh and pulled out a bottle of wine he stole from Lucius last week. It was Friday. He deserved to have a bit of a break. "What is wrong, master?" came Nagini's voice as she slithered up to coil on his desk, crinkling the newest Wisengamot bills. Not that Tom really minded. "Nothing is wrong, Nagini. I am just confused," he said back as he swirled the wine in the glass. "Is this about the little speaker again, master?" Tom nodded his head and took a sip of his wine. When wasn't it about Eliza these days? She confused him, truly and completely unlike anything else in his entire life. "Silly, master. Master needs to talk to the little speaker." Tom smiled softly and patted Nagini on her head. If only it was that simple. But what could he even tell her? What could he tell her when he had no idea what to even tell himself? It had started, Salazar when had it even started, possibly in that first meeting. Tom could admit he had casual magpie tendencies. He liked interesting things. Everything had the tendency to be unbearably dull, and so when something different appeared, Tom tended to get a bit obsessed. Pulling things apart, seeing how they worked even if the something in question was a person. Perhaps especially if that something was a person. And Eliza had been one of the most interesting people he had come across in a long time, still was one of the most interesting people he knew. And then, well then, he had found out she was his Horcrux. His Horcrux. They shared one of the most powerful connections known to wizard kind, and this tiny spitfire of a girl quite literally housed a piece of his soul. Tom did his best to rein in his possessive tendencies. He knew he had a lot of them after all. He figured it came from having nothing for most of his younger years. Whatever was his own completely and utterly. The trinkets he continued to send to Eliza were just proof of that, pretty things for his Horcrux. He had thought that was just his usual possessiveness leaking through, but what if and then there had been the Triwizard Tournament? Eliza challenged him every step of the way, bright and unyielding and brilliant in a way he had never encountered before. And he couldn't deny that it wasn't just possessiveness then. Eliza wasn't just another trinket he could collect or an ally he was pleased to have. Because Tom, above all else, wanted her happy. Tom couldn't remember when he had cared for another's happiness beyond superficial manipulation. But hadn't Eliza said it? "I thought we were friends, Tom, friends." Tom had never truly had one of those before. Not how Eliza treated her friends anyway, and so he had just assumed that was that. Friends, a novel concept, but a term that could describe his and Eliza's relationship. But upon closer observation, through the year he realized that wasn't quite true, was it? Because Eliza didn't treat him like another one of her friends. The Yule Ball itself was a testament to that. But surely that could be put down to their connection through the Horcrux. It would explain why her name had been what he would most dearly miss. Tom was no stranger to obsession. It was the closest thing he could feel to love, really. And he couldn't deny that he was well and truly obsessed with Eliza Potter. And then Yule happened with her memories, and Tom found his obsession growing. Because Eliza truly had seen every part of him, every monstrous, unlovable, twisted part of himself. And yet she looked up at him with those bright eyes, and Tom knew he would never be the same if she actually turned him away. She had even saved his life. He thought he could hear her sometimes. When he dreamt he was back in that graveyard, when his litany of "I'm fine, I'm here, I'm alive" wasn't enough. He thought he could hear her voice screaming his name, terrified and raw and panicked, and Tom knew he never wanted to hear her like that again. Smart, brilliant, charming, witty Eliza Potter, his Horcrux, his friend, and maybe, possibly even something more. Tom wasn't an idiot. He could recognize beauty when he saw it, and he was also no stranger to indulging when it struck his fancy. Attraction wasn't as confounding of an emotion as love. So perhaps that was what his obsession had mutated into. It would certainly explain the brief sparks of jealousy, the increase in possessiveness. He had started flirting with her more after that, and she just blushed so prettily that he couldn't help but keep it up. It was rare to see the girl at a loss for words. She was always quick-witted, a bright spark in a dark room, and Tom enjoyed getting one up on her, as it were. And then at the Malfoy Yule Ball she had just looked so stunning, and even after that at the Azkaban break-in. Strong and powerful and larger than life, he couldn't help but compare Eliza Potter to a hurricane. Nothing that met her was left standing, even, impossibly, himself. And for his birthday she truly had gone above and beyond. And what was he meant to do in the face of that, in the face of that blatant care and affection? The fact that she remembered his one-off comment about his favorite opera, the fact that she sat by his side without complaining for hours as he played the piano. What was he meant to do with a girl that made him feel more alive than he ever had before? The answer had seemed simple then, when she stood on her doorstep looking like divine temptation itself. That kiss. Tom had never experienced anything like that kiss in his whole life. And that was when he realized this obsession he had been harboring for Eliza ran far deeper than anything as superficial as simple attraction or possessiveness. He treasured her. He would even go as far as to say that on some level he even adored her, because he knew that she loved butterbeer more than anything else, and he even stocked some in his cabinet for when she came around. He knew she preferred sugar quills over chocolate, and that even though she pretended to like her coffee black, she usually put in far too many sugars to be reasonable. She only drank tea when she was in the presence of Lupin, who he knew she considered one of her uncles, and when she drank hot chocolate, she always had 3 marshmallows exactly. She spent her free periods with Jormungand in the chamber, because he knew she rested easier by the basilisk's side than in her own bed, and he knew that however impossible it seemed she actually cared for him. He knew more about Eliza Potter than he did anyone else alive, and he also knew that whatever this thing was between them, it couldn't continue. His little star was only 16. She had a whole life ahead of her, a whole world out there just waiting for her to take it. And he knew if he even hinted that he needed her to stick around, she would never leave his side. Eliza Potter in every respect was his equal. She challenged him and helped him and made him enjoy life more than anyone else ever has before. And he could shower her in trinkets and keep a stock of butterbeer waiting for her. Merlin he could take over magical Britain for her with her. But he could never love her, and she deserved that. She deserved someone who could love her, wholly and truly, because even if he disagreed with Dumbledore's saccharine bullshit about love and friendship, he couldn't argue that Eliza deserved it. After all she'd been through, all she'd done, she deserved more than someone who could only ever feel fondness. Tom was born without the ability to love, and nobody, not even Eliza Potter, would be able to change that. Tom took another sip of his wine and tried to forget the way Eliza's lips felt against his own. Eliza woke up in the morning and knew instantly that today she had one objective, and one objective only. She was going to cause some trouble. Daphne was already gone for the day. It was Valentine's, and she had headed into Hogsmeade with Susan Bones for some quality time. Draco had proceeded to make several kissy faces at her, and Daphne had retaliated by jinxing his hair a bright, flamboyant pink. Par for the course, really. Blaze had also managed to snag a date for Valentine's Day, although Eliza had long since given up on keeping track of his conquests. Which just left. What have you done? Draco asked as she bounded down the stairs. He had his head in Theo's lap, who had unceremoniously planked his astronomy book on top of Draco's face. Eliza could just make out his suspicious grey eyes underneath. Draco and Theo, the dream team. It's not about what I have done, Draco, it's about what we're going to do. The sun is bright. We literally live underneath the Black Lake. The birds are singing. There are no birds here. And every day is a new opportunity. Eliza finished brightly and watched Theo lift his book with well-practiced ease as Draco shot up to glare at her. And what do you mean we? Eliza pouted. Aren't you always saying I shouldn't do things on my own, and that I need to trust you and that friendship is the okay? We get it. Draco cut her off with a frantic wave of his hands. But what exactly are you dragging us into? It's about Umbridge, isn't it? Theo asked, already packing away his astronomy homework. He knew her so well. Of course. Sirius and Remus have given me full parental approval to cause absolute hell, considering the lawful route didn't exactly work out. Like you've ever needed parental approval, Draco grumbled, but stood up anyway and started to look for his shoes, which he must have kicked off sometime before he chose to use Theo as a sofa. Parents love Eliza, Theo said as he too started pulling on his shoes. She's never had any trouble getting their approval. That's because I'm an angel. A hard-working, intelligent, charming young girl who's risen above her troubled past. It's because you actually get them to believe that bullshit, Theo responded with a smirk. Or some parents are mad enough to like you anyway, Draco tacked on, jumping around as he shoved his feet into his shoes. Eliza couldn't even argue with them. What's the agenda then? Theo asked, jumping up, straightening his shirt sleeves. Stage 1, Eliza said as they all made their way out of the common room. Coffee. As expected, Draco cut in with an understanding nod. Stage 2, we tracked down Luna Lovegood. Unexpected, but rather intriguing, he continued, and Theo snickered quietly at her right. Stage 3, we finalize a deal with her and her father. Doesn't he own the Quibbler? Theo asked as they finally reached the great hall and pushed the doors open. Stage 4, we reach out to my dear friend Rita Skeeter and put her in touch with said Luna Lovegood. Oh, I see where you're going with this now, Draco said with an excited smile as Eliza poured herself a coffee and dumped some sugar into it. And Stage 5, Theo asked, making him and Draco a cup of tea. We sit back and watch. Eliza finished with a wide smirk. Umbridge was going to regret stepping into her school by the time Eliza was done with her. Tracking down Luna Lovegood was a surprisingly hard task. The girl didn't have that many friends apparently, and Eliza was left lost as she tried to find the flighty blonde. In the end, she and her court were left to turn to the two other sneakiest people she knew. Fred, George, Eliza called in a sing-song voice as she walked into the abandoned classroom the pair had commandeered as their own private lab. The pair were bent over what looked like another one of their skiving snack boxes. Why, if it isn't Eliza Potter and her Eichel friends? Hello, little Malfoy, not. Why doesn't Thea get an irritating nickname? Draco complained under his breath, and Eliza saw out of the corner of her eye when Theo stepped on his foot. Forge, Gred, I need a favor, Eliza said, and the two red heads perked up. She had an odd relationship with the twins. They had come together this year to take down Umbridge, but even before then they had usually been quite ambivalent with one another. They had been some of the first people she met after all. Won her first train to Hogwarts those years ago. And what can we do for you today? Said George. And what do we get out of it? Said Fred, or who she assumed was Fred. She was quite good at telling them apart when they weren't intentionally trying to screw her over. I need to find a certain Luna Lovegood to aid in our mission to overthrow the Pink Toad. Eliza explained and watched as the twins exchanged glances. Okay, they said in unison with mischievous grins. But you have to help us with this, they ended, and held up what looked like a prototype of the nosebleed nougat that they had yet to perfect. You solve this while we find your little Lovegood, they said, and handed her the small sweet before turning around. Eliza knew better than to ask how they found everyone in the whole of Hogwarts. She just left them to it. Turning to Draco, she held up the sweet. "You're the potions expert here. Help us out." Draco visibly preened at the praise, but still looked at her suspiciously as he held the sweet between his fingers. "What does it do?" "The red end induces a nosebleed. The white end stops it, or it should. It hasn't yet done the job." She didn't even want to know how the twins explained that particular accident to Madame Pomfrey. Draco sniffed the sweet and frowned in deliberation as he thought through everything. Eliza was good with potions. Straight outstanding student that she was, but she didn't have an innate knowledge like Draco did. "We found your runaway Lovegood. She's holed up in the astronomy tower." Eliza smiled in thanks, and all three of them turned their attention onto Draco, who shoved the sweet back at the Weasley twins with a disapproving frown. "You used sugar syrup to create the sweet texture, right?" Draco asked, and they all shared curious looks. "Boiled sugar syrup, yes," the twins said, and Draco sighed. "You put the ground-up wormhood in with the syrup, didn't you?" The silence was damning. "The water you put in to make up the sugar syrup would reduce the consistency of the wormhood, meaning it won't react with the other potion ingredients. You either need to add the wormhood after the sugar syrup, or increase the amounts of wormhood to balance it," Draco lectured, and then for good measure lobbed the sweet at George's head. Idiots. Draco was the best, really. The twins shared dumbfounded looks, as if they couldn't believe Draco was actually smart, which Eliza felt offended by. Of course Draco was smart. Just because he was dramatic didn't mean he wasn't intelligent. "Are we meeting with Lovegood before she disappears again then, Eliza?" Theo drawled, eyeing the other prototypes that were lying carelessly across the room. "Ah, yes," Eliza said with a smile before turning to Fred and George. "Pleasure doing business with you boys," she said with a wink, and then disappeared out of the door, Theo and Draco flanking her sides. They were officially onto stage 2. "Hello, Eliza Potter," Lovegood greeted before Eliza even had the chance to introduce herself. The blonde was sat cross-legged at the top of the astronomy tower, cloud watching. "Hello, Lovegood," Eliza greeted and came to sit next to the girl, Theo and Draco coming to sit with her. "These are my friends, Draco Malfoy and Theo Nart." "I know," she said simply and returned to watching the clouds. Eliza smiled in bemusement at the girl. Luna really was odd, but it was a nice kind of odd. "Has your father gotten back to me about my recent proposition?" "Oh, yes," Luna said sweetly. "He's very excited to run the story. He's not a fan of the toad either." Not after Luna paused here and moved to grab her left hand, and Eliza felt sharp fury run through her. She couldn't believe Umbridge used that infernal blood quill of hers against more students than just her. "That's good," Eliza said with a grin. "If I get all the stuff I promised together by the end of the day, when do you think it will be published?" Luna hummed and twisted the butterbeer cork necklace around her finger. "I'd say just a couple of days. Daddy thinks you were rather thorough with your research." Eliza leapt to her feet with a start. "Excellent," she said with a grin, and Theo and Draco clambered up confusedly behind her. "Remember, Luna, everything must stay anonymous, okay?" Luna nodded and then turned to stare at Eliza, her usually vacant eyes uncannily sharp. "And Eliza, I really don't think it's the weather for tea." And with that the girl flopped back to lie on the floor, watching the clouds. Eliza turned to walk away and promised herself to keep Luna's words in mind. "I wonder if I'll find a crumple-horned smorcack today. That would be nice, well, some of them at least." "Okay, Eliza," Draco said as they reached the bottom of the stairs. "You're going to explain the plan in detail this time, because now I'm just confused. I thought you were going to do an interview." Fudge put a halt to Umbridge's trial by threatening to use the Daily Prophet and expose how many untried Death Eaters we actually have sat in the Wisengamot. And obviously that wouldn't end well, so we backed out of our initial plan. "Yeah, you told us that, but isn't he just going to retaliate when he sees you're slagging him off in the papers anyway?" Eliza rose her eyebrows. "I'm sure he would." "Then oh, this isn't about getting back at Fudge, is it? This isn't even about you," Draco said, and Theo smirked beside her. Fudge was relying on a public outcry when he revealed his information. "Well, so am I. Imagine what the public will think when it comes out that Hogwarts is being held under a dictatorship and the children of the next generation are being systematically abused." Eliza spoke passionately. And when the minister tries to release the information on the death, Ida supporters, he'll just be seen to be making a grab for attention and hiding away the real issue, Theo said understandingly, and Eliza nodded her head with a bright grin. Okay. I need to go and write a letter to Rita telling her to expect correspondence from one Luna Lovegood. If she writes the article for the Quibbler, I'll pay her quite handsomely and make sure she's never out of work again. Draco, I need you to go to your dorm. In Blaze's drawer, you'll find handwritten anonymous testimonies from students that Umbridge has harmed. Theo, I need you to go to Carlin Creevy, that twerp. Draco interrupted, and Eliza nodded strongly. Yes, that twerp. Tell him that Eliza Potter needs the pictured evidence now. Any students who has been subjected to Umbridge's blood quill have been asked if they'd be willing to prove evidence, and a few agreed. A picture tells 1,000 words after all. Okay, this is fun, and old Draco said, and Eliza snorted. She and her court must have a very skewed sense of what was fun. But what will we actually achieve? I doubt it will get Umbridge removed. They'll probably just start calling the Quibbler propaganda and call it a day. Probably. Eliza agreed easily, but it's not going to do nothing. Fudge is going to be put under tons of pressure. The students of Hogwarts are going to have a rallying point, and most importantly, Eliza said, and gave Draco and Theo a toothy grin. The Umbridge family name is going to be disgraced for centuries. There's no greater crime than harming a child after all. If not this year or the next, then at some point she'll be stripped of her position. She won't be able to get any other job. She won't be allowed to access her seat on the Wisengamot. This article is going to set into motion the absolute ruination of Dolor's Umbridge. Eliza spoke with malicious glee and laughed to herself happily. Remember stage 5, Theo. Theo paused, and then a wide smile slipped onto his face. Sit back and watch it happen. Eliza nodded to herself, ridiculously pleased. Sit back and watch it happen.